All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be getting into my Week 3 deep dive here for you guys for the DraftKings main slate on Sunday. We'll be touching on all my favorite values, core plays, game stacks as well. We'll do that by doing a game-by-game breakdown. Let's go ahead and get into it. So we'll start off with this first game, which is going to be the Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The biggest question in this game is the health of Brian Thomas Jr., who seemingly is good to go, but he did cite a wrist injury, which could have led to a couple of the drops that he had last Sunday. We'll see if that was kind of an excuse as well. I don't know. We'll see. He is someone that you would argue, though, is due for a massive game if he is healthy. Now, he is someone that throughout the off-season last year and tail end of the season last year, I thought he was a bit overrated. I thought he was more of like a third round, maybe in fourth round talent in fantasy football drafts, just because if you look at the way he was successful last year, it was a lot of deep throws and from Mac Jones as well. And so basically the concerns I had about him are what are popping up right now. You know, to me, he is more of a like Michael Pittman talent rather than a Mike Evans talent, if that makes sense. I think you guys can kind of get the comparison where he is a solid player. Maybe Jerry Jeudy as a better example, where he's a solid talent. And when he needs to get the football, he can really go off. I don't think we are seeing him be someone that they are going to scheme up their whole playbook around, which is what I think people thought he was at the start of the season when he was like a borderline first rounder in some fantasy football drafts. Again, that's not to take away from the talent that he has, but I think you guys get the point there. But what I'm trying to get at is he might not be a terrible stacking option as a low-owned stack in this game against the Houston Texans. And it is worth taking a peek at this game, guys. So it is a 2-point spread. Okay, I would actually favor the Houston Texans to win this game at 2.5. If you guys can get those odds, we are seeing different odds. Some have it at 1. Okay, so very, very interesting there. Game total, though, it is about 44.5. So basically the average that you would expect, the normal game that we'd expect in terms of the game total. And when we just go ahead and look at kind of the projections here for the Jaguars, nothing too crazy. I don't mind like Travis Etienne. I think there's still a chance that he does get a healthy workload again in this game. Not a terrible matchup there against the Jaguars, although it's not the same as what we had last week. And really, for all of the Jaguars players, I don't necessarily see the need to go out of our way to target them unless we are stacking them. That being said, there is one player like value-wise I think could be good. Parker Washington ended up not playing that much, but he was pretty productive last week, guys. So he had 5 receptions on 5 targets for 76 yards. You know, watching the film, he was someone that really stood out to me. And then I'm like, looking back in the stats, he only played 26% of the routes. On 26% of the routes, had 23% of the snaps in total. And for me, at the start of the season, I thought he would be more of a fixture in this offense because I didn't necessarily buy into De'Ami Brown too much, although he had 7 targets and had himself a very good game as well. Again, I didn't really love the hype that Brian Thomas Jr. was getting. And then Travis Hunter, you know, a part-time player on offense, I thought he'd be a better value. Now, he's someone that we probably won't need to get to with Brian Thomas Jr. healthy, but I did want to call that out. Now, it is worth calling out as well the snaps that Brendan Strange is getting as well. Not the best matchup, but don't be shocked if he does end up having a good game. He played 90% of the snaps last week. It is very difficult to get a tight end that's playing 90% of the snaps at this cheap of a price tag. Now, if you watch my core plays video, we are getting Juwan Johnson at basically the same price tag, but that's basically it. So Strange has had some chemistry with Trevor Lawrence as well. So we don't mind it if you want to play him to get a little bit different. I won't mind being overweight on him as a play. You know, it's extremely early in the week to talk about ownership, but he is only about like 3% projected ownership, so maybe not a terrible option to get to Brendan Strange there. We'll go ahead now and jump on into the Texans. I do think this is a week where we actually could think about playing Nick Chubb, which sounds weird to say. He's been someone I've been quietly hyping up for you guys this season because he looked good in the preseason. And then I think we saw last week where he was able to bust a touchdown that, not terrible. That was a tough matchup for him. And so the fact that Nick Chubb was able to score that touchdown last week to me is encouraging. Look at the projected stats, about 15 rush attempts, 1 reception, so about 16 opportunities. And the total yards, not great, but 65. I would actually argue that's a little bit too low for him given the matchup here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it is worth calling out with Nick Chubb. He did not play a lot of the snaps last week, only 52% of the snaps, which to me is concerning. Okay, I do think we're eventually going to see Woody Marks start to take over for that RB1 role. I think that's eventually going to happen this season. Why? Because Woody Marks does everything well. Okay, he's a good pass blocker, can catch passes, good runner as well. I do think right now Nick Chubb is still the better runner. I think as the season progresses and Chubb gets a little bit more wear and tear on him, that role could be reduced. But he had a 30% route share. To me, that's crazy that he was even getting involved in the passing game. 2 targets in that game for almost 5 DFS points just in the passing game, which is crazy. Okay, ended up having a solid week overall, which obviously we're encouraged by. But he's nothing more than like a GPP play. The thing is, it's more due to the matchup. Now, it's not a good matchup, I would say, but it's not a bad matchup as well. I know the stats kind of say thus far this season that it is a difficult matchup, but it is an easier matchup than what he had last weekend. You could argue in week 1 as well. That being said, it's probably a decent time to try to sell high on him if you guys are someone that is playing season-long leagues and potentially has him as well. And I do think it is worth calling out like Dalton Schultz as a potential tight end play. We don't have to go crazy with it at all, though. He is someone that is just due to get a lot of snaps simply because they have to have him get a lot of snaps. What was strange, though, is he only saw 61% of the snaps last week, was splitting the work 2 weeks ago as well. Now, he did see a 71% route share, okay? So getting a decent amount of routes. It is a difficult matchup. He is only going to be someone that I consider as more of a GPP only type play. Maybe this game ends up being a shootout. I could see it. I think that's within the realm of possibility. So maybe you're someone that thinks that as well. Maybe this is a get right spot for someone like CJ Stroud as well, who really hasn't been, dominating all too well, but he is someone that could benefit with Christian Kirk potentially being back as well. Okay, they've been forced to play Xavier Hutchinson a bunch, Justin Watson a bunch, and then the 2 rookies as well. I do think that he does need Christian Watson back. Okay, he practiced on Wednesday, limited role, and I do expect him to be back. Now, if he does end up sitting, it is worth calling out Xavier Hutchinson as a potential value play. Hutchinson has a 71% route share, playing about 60% of the snaps in the absence of Christian Kirk. Now, he hasn't been dominating by any means, but the fact that he's playing that much and is priced at 3.5 in a decent matchup, I do think that is something that is worth calling out. Overall, though, for this game, I don't think I see many options for DFS purposes. Nico Collins, GPP only play. Him and also Brian Thomas Jr. are in like get right spots, if you will, where I do think both teams could like overemphasize getting them the football. That is something we tend to see in week 3, a bunch, especially star players that have gone off to slow starts. I don't mind that approach, but again, nothing too crazy in terms of the plays we want to be going out of our way to target. So now let's go ahead and get into this next game, guys. We got the Atlanta Falcons versus the Carolina Panthers. So in regards to like the injury report for them, nothing too crazy for the Falcons. Darnell Mooney is expected to be, more healthy in this game. I mean, he ended up playing 86% of the snaps, guys, had 100% route share as well last week. Like, he is good to go. And he is someone like price tag wise, you could see theoretically going off. The issue with him and the other pass catchers in this game for the Falcons is they might not need to go off, especially the receivers, okay? Because I think this is much more of a run opportunity for someone like John Robinson. And I've really loved the workload that Robinson has gotten thus far this year, okay? They knew against Tampa they weren't going to be successful rushing the football. So they got Robinson involved in the passing game. He ended up with 7 targets in that game. Then last week against Minnesota, definitely much more of a balanced attack, okay? We saw Robinson really go off in the rushing game, okay? That was with, maybe a bad defense. We'll see, especially rushing the football. But this matchup with the Carolina Panthers is basically middle of the road across the board. And so I do think it's a great spot for Robinson. I mentioned the core plays video. I do value him as a core play, although I do find it kind of difficult to pay up for him as well. And then we also look at the Atlanta Falcons, guys. Kyle Pitts is someone we could consider as a play as well. The Carolina Panthers have been pretty poor stopping opposing tight ends thus far this season. The stats are that they have given up 18.9 points per game to opposing tight ends. They've given up 13 receptions and 188 yards. The 188 yards is the most, whereas like the Ravens are the actually easiest matchup thus far. They've given up a few more receptions is the difference there. But if you look at Kyle Pitts, he's actually been the first read target for Michael Penix a decent amount. And this is something I've talked about a lot already this season, but I do think the offseason golf that they played together has led to some chemistry on the field. Just the little things off the field that tend to add up on the field. I think we are seeing that here with Kyle Pitts. I think Michael Penix does trust him a little bit, and his target share will probably seemingly continue to go down when Penix and Mooney start to get more of a more chemistry built up. But for now, I do think Pitts in this matchup is not a bad play. But those are really the only two Atlanta Falcons players I think we need to play, especially when we consider the odds of this game. Okay, so the Falcons are 5.5 point favorites. Again, that kind of echoes why someone like Bijan Robinson is a good play, but the game total is nothing crazy, guys. Some are giving us 43.5, and then you worry about the blowout spread a little bit. That is something to definitely consider when we're targeting players in this game. And it is worth calling out, as it sits right now, guys, Robinson is getting about 17% ownership. We'll see if that holds up. I would imagine it's going to be between like 15 and 23%, so probably right. He is someone that will be pretty highly owned. We look at the opportunities that he's projected to get, about 21, total yards over 100, decent chance to score a touchdown here as well. Then we look at Kyle Pitts, stats-wise, guys, projected to get 3.5 receptions and about 42.9 receiving yards. So not terrible, but also not great. We'll go ahead now and jump on into the Carolina Panthers here. I will say Bryce Young is a little bit interesting as like a GPP stack. He is someone that on the season, I thought he was going to rush the football more. Okay, he is someone that is a good rusher. He should be an actual good version of Justin Fields. He's a better thrower of the football than Justin Fields, and I think he's almost as good of a runner. He just doesn't do it that much. Now, that might seem like a hot take to some people, maybe not after last week's game for Fields, but Bryce Young has had a weird season thus far where he has started off the game pretty slow, and as the game has progressed, has gotten better. He does need to get off to a good start. Now, thankfully for him, it does seem like Tate McMillan has been someone that has looked good. I really like the talent for him. McMillan is projected at around 10 DFS points. I would argue that's a little bit too low. And I do want to talk about one of my favorite values actually on the slate is going to be Hunter Renfrow. So Hunter Renfrow, guys, actually ended up playing 82% of the snaps in week 2. Okay, had an 88% route share, ended up with 9 targets. So we do see through 2 games, guys, 9 and 6 targets is a bunch. He almost had a touchdown in week 1 as well. That is something we shouldn't ignore. And so if he's going to be getting this healthy of a workload in this game that, they likely are going to be playing from behind again, I do think we should be looking at Hunter Renfrow. I mentioned this on a different video, but it does make me mad that they traded Adam Thielen because I had a lot of late round best ball stacks with Adam Thielen and Bryce Young, and just seeing how much Hunter Renfrow has been utilized is annoying. And I also went out and got Coker as well as a late round pick as well. So this is a little bit frustrating because those two players would probably be going off. And not a terrible idea to monitor Coker's health status because he is someone that once he comes back should be in for a decent role. Now, Xavier Legette is currently questionable as well, which we'll see. He did play a bunch of snaps, 80% of the snaps. If he ends up sitting Bryson Tremaine would be someone that would benefit. He ended up with 5 targets. He was actually someone that was decent in the preseason as well. Min price play. Like, I wouldn't go out of my way to play him other than the fact that if I love the rest of my build and I need a decent min price play, he'd be a great option in that regard. Okay, where, again, you love the rest of your build. We know that Legette's out, and then we're just going out of our way to target him. I will say, McMillan at this price tag, is a little bit interesting. He looks solid. He looks very smooth, guys. You look at Deontay Johnson last year, he kind of reminds me of him, just how he's being utilized for the Panthers and not making, many mistakes there. So that's a good thing for them. Running back wise, Chuba Hubbard actually saw a bigger workload last week than he did in the previous week in regards to snaps, and actually had a 72% route share, which to me was a little bit surprising there. Workload wise, we actually saw Chuba Hubbard, I always call him Chubbard. I don't know if you guys do that as well. We saw him get 10 carries. We saw Rico Dowdle get 6. Okay, so nothing encouraging there for him. It is a difficult matchup as well. But again, I will say, to me, Bryce Young is not a terrible stacking option. I mean, he's throwing the football a bunch. He needs to rush the football more. But we are getting better value later on in this video. So let's go ahead now and move on into this next game. We got the Green Bay Packers here versus the Cleveland Browns. So the only questionable player here is going to be Josh Jacobs. We're not worried about him. We're expecting him to play and have his normal workload. The tough part for Josh Jacobs is that he has gone off to a slow start because he's had some difficult matchups, and because, Washington, you're just going to throw the football against them as well. I will say, guys, if you are someone that does have Josh Jacobs in like season-long leagues, if he has a bad week this week, if you're someone that doesn't have Josh Jacobs in season-long leagues and he has a bad week this week, look to trade for him because the schedule does get a little bit easier, and he is someone that should be appealing in that regard. Same thing for Junkins as well. I am someone that had a lot of him in best ball drafts early on in the season, and then because I was probably overexposed, didn't draft him as much. And I didn't end up on him in my season-long leagues. I am kind of hoping that he sucks in this game because I really do love the talent. And it's kind of like the Bill Krosky Merritt take I had, where it's like, it is terrible that Monday Night Football run that he had caused his ADP to skyrocket even more than it already had. Because he is someone I did want to draft, but then once his ADP hit a peak value, it made him very difficult to draft. That's kind of the same logic here with Junkins, where I want him to struggle in this game so I can trade for him in season-long leagues because I do love his talent, and it is a difficult matchup. And so I'm expecting him to struggle. And if he goes off in this matchup, it's going to be tough to get him at a value that I would appreciate. Now, it is worth calling out with Junkins. I did think he looked a lot, honestly, like Nick Chubb. Okay, he was someone that was supposed to have a limited workload last week, guys, and he did. He only played 26% of the snaps. But, I mean, my goodness, he had 13 opportunities in those 26 snaps. That is crazy. Now, some of his production, I will say, a decent amount of it actually came late in that game against backups, which is a little bit concerning. But also, the fact that he was able to do what he did in an NFL game while not really practicing that much was encouraging. Now, I do want to talk about the game total real quick in this game and the point spread. So it is a low-scoring game, 42 or so. So don't necessarily love that. And it is a 7.5 point, almost 8 point spread for the Green Bay Packers. Okay. And so if we're doing that, I honestly do not like many of the plays that we would get to in this game for either team. Okay. Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, not necessary players I want to go out of my way to target in this matchup. Maybe Isaiah Bond, someone you could throw like a dart throw on. He ended up playing 38% of the snaps at a 40% route share, but not worth it. Again, like I think Tremaine would be someone that's a better option there. Tight end wise, like Fannin is a little bit interesting at his price tag. He's someone that's playing, 63, probably to 70% of the snaps, maybe a little bit more in this game if it ends up being a blowout. I could see that, but overall, nothing really there. For the Green Bay Packers, kind of the same thing. Like I do think we could potentially look at like Tucker Kraft as a play, just because he is a stud tight end and he's still at a cheap price tag. Like to me, this is getting an elite tight end at a cheap price tag. Okay, he ended up playing 90% of the snaps last week, had a 80% route share, ended up with 7 targets. You saw him have that awesome game that he had. He has 2 touchdowns thus far this season as well. I don't mind him as a play. Like it's not an egregious pay up. 4.7 is too cheap for him at his talent level. And I will say again, Matthew Golden, guys, my goodness, the guy has had a ton of air yards thus far this season. Well, that's not exactly true, I guess. Last week he did. Jordan Love missed him twice. To me, I'm reading that as more of a chemistry thing where Jordan Love missed part of the preseason and training camp due to a thumb injury that he had a surgery on. And I just don't think they have the chemistry built up just yet. I actually think that's why we saw Dontavian Wicks actually start the game last week and playing a decent amount. Wicks played about 60% of the snaps as well. He's at a cheap price tag. Romeo Doubs is still the receiver number 1. He's at a kind of a weird price tag as well. He's been going off and productive. I'm kind of surprised by that price tag, but it does truly feel like Matthew Golden is due to go off. I believe I saw a stat that said Matthew Golden had the highest separation rate among all active receivers through 2 weeks. He has 2 receptions as far as the season. Okay. And part of the issue though, as well, is on a lot of the plays where Matthew Golden has been open, Jordan Love hasn't need to go off his second read because he's made the pass completions on his first read. Like the touchdown to Tucker Kraft in week 1, had Jordan Love had to look off Tucker Kraft, the next read would have been Golden and it would have been an easy Golden touchdown as well. And so it's highly encouraging that Matthew Golden is getting open. This really, if you guys are like a Green Bay Packers fan or remember like Christian Watson's rookie season, it very much feels like that, where everything's pointing to a breakout for Matthew Golden, like it was Christian Watson his rookie year. And maybe that happens here. I doubt it, but it does seem like it's due to happen. And then once it happens, he's going to be a stud receiver for us for the rest of the season. They need to build that chemistry. It's just not there yet. So, yes, guys, it's kind of my long way of saying I do think we should look at the receivers. I'm not going to play Josh Jacobs. If you want to get to Tucker Kraft, you can do that there as well. And so now we go ahead here and get into one of the more appealing games, I will say, on the slate, which is going to be Cincinnati versus Minnesota. And to me, it's appealing, honestly, because we are getting these backup quarterbacks in this game, which creates some sort of strange value. So, like Carson Wentz, guys, I given the way J.J. McCarthy has played, I do not see a big drop-off between Carson Wentz and J.J. McCarthy. I could argue, and we haven't seen Carson Wentz play, okay? He is still new to the offense as well. That is concerning. But for me, the whole offseason, I was kind of teasing one of my buddies that is a Minnesota sports fan, lives in Minneapolis. I kept saying, like, Sam Howell is the quarterback number one. That's why they brought him in. And I was teasing because it was super strange to see a lot of fans hype up J.J. McCarthy when they have never seen him really play in an NFL game. And it was just kind of one of those spots where why not bring in a veteran? Like, to me, during this offseason, when Aaron Rodgers was thinking about going to Minnesota, I'm like, why not? Like, that's perfect. Rodgers wants to play 1, maybe 2 more years. Bring him in. You have a chance to potentially win a Super Bowl. J.J. McCarthy can, learn off of him as well. They obviously didn't go that route. They went with more the veteran backup route. And I just don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off. If anything, I do think Carson Wentz, being the quarterback, could end up helping out a player like Justin Jefferson. Okay, Jefferson has only seen 6 and 7 targets, which is crazy. Okay, like given the way the offense has looked, he should be getting more than that. It's been terrible, just like forcing the football. And I think Carson Wentz presents an opportunity to do that. And so I don't mind betting on that. I don't mind betting on Justin Jefferson kind of going off in this game due to Carson Wentz forcing him the football. Now, that being said, I don't hate the idea of getting to Jalen Naylor or Adam Thielen as well. I think this could actually end up being a sneaky game stack. It's not one you're going to want to go crazy with. Don't get me wrong there. Okay, because when we look at the game total, it is a low game total, guys, only 41.5. Okay, point spread is projected to be, a game that I would say is interesting that the Bengals aren't favored to win. 3 points. Vikings are 3.5, 3-point favorites. In some cases, 2.5-point favorites. So we're seeing differing lines there. I find that to be a little bit interesting. But the way I'm reading into that is that Vegas is buying into Carson Wentz as a quarterback. So at 4K, I do think he's one of the better value plays on this slate. Now, the issue there is the fact that Aaron Jones is out in this game as well. And based off of the comments from Kevin O'Connell, it has basically seemed like Jordan Mason is going to be a bell cow in this game, which makes sense because they don't really have anyone else. They were forced to go out and sign Cam Akers. I think that's fine, especially for this game, but overall, we don't really care about that. The question I have is, can we get away with playing Carson Wentz and Jordan Mason in a build? Maybe they're both very cheap. It should raise our floor, but I don't know if we necessarily need to go crazy with that there as well. Now, it is worth calling out just some of the projections that we are getting, guys. So looking at Carson Wentz, 3.65x value return. He's projected to get 14.5. If he ends up doing that, he is just the correct play. Okay. The issue would be is if another quarterback goes off for like 30 points, that's a higher price quarterback. Maybe that ends up happening. But I really like the idea of paying down at quarterback this week and paying up for some of the studs that we have in the slate. We also look at Jordan Mason, projected to get 2.8x, one of the best values on this slate in general for the running back position. Then we look at some of the other plays that I don't think we need to go crazy with. Hawkinson looks washed. I mentioned this a bunch already in the channel. It's always fun to see people getting to the point I've been making for months on a primetime game where people can finally see it. Most of you guys know I watch most of the games. And if I don't watch most of the games, I try to watch highlights of certain spots that I missed. But it's been pretty clear that Hawkinson does not look good. So it was nice to see people kind of echoing that last week. What's interesting, though, Adam Thielen, guys, ended up playing more snaps, ended up playing 89% of the snaps, 80% of the snaps, had an 89% route share. He's someone that could get more involved as well. So him at his price tag is a little bit interesting, although I do think Naylor is the one we can trust a little bit more, guys. Naylor is playing 100% of the snaps. Okay, so like Naylor right now, until Jordan Addison is back, is still an interesting value play at 3.8. He should be higher priced than Thielen. Thielen just has a little bit more name value. So we kind of hammered that home. Let's go ahead and jump now into the Cincinnati Bengals. So I really like the idea of getting to Chase Brown in this game. Okay, this matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, in regards to yards given up, they've actually given up the most yards to opposing running backs, which is fascinating, okay? Because overall, they rank like 22nd in terms of points given up. So bottom 10 in the league, but 22nd in the league in terms of points given up to opposing running backs. So interesting there for sure. But Chase Brown, just watching the game last week, I'm all like, what are you guys doing? Get him the football. I mean, I know Jamar Chase went off. I know Jake Browning ended up playing a fine game, even though he had 3 interceptions. But to me, I think they'll watch the film and be like, yeah, we need to get Chase Brown going. And he's another great buy low opportunity, guys, in fantasy football leagues. Go out and try to target him if you can get him, because people are probably weary of this offense now that Joe Burrow is going to be out. And to me, the biggest concern is not the quarterback switch, because you still had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins there. It's the line. The line was terrible for both quarterbacks last week. Tight end wise, we're not targeting any of them. I don't think we need to get there. So for me, guys, Chase Brown's fine if you want to get to Chase or Higgins. I'm okay with that, but I don't think we necessarily need to go crazy with that. The only issue that I have with Chase Brown is the price tag. Okay, 6.8 is a lot to pay up for him when I think we should be prioritizing Bijan Robinson and then Jonathan Taylor. Those are the two pay ups I want to get to. Although, when we look at the ownership for Chase Brown, under 8%, that is interesting. Under 10%, that is interesting there, especially when we look at his projected workload. 20 opportunities, guys, is expected to get around 15 DFS points. If he scores a touchdown, obviously, it's going to be a slate breaker there as well. So then we go ahead and jump on into the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New England Patriots. And this is an interesting spot because I personally thought both defenses would be better than they have been for both teams. Drake May gets a good matchup seemingly against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Aaron Rodgers gets a good matchup seemingly against the New England Patriots. They're both kind of priced cheap as well. Like, it wouldn't be surprising to see either of them go for 20 DFS points. Stacking wise, I do think we want to stack both quarterbacks. DK Metcalf gets by far his best matchup of the year. Okay. Jets was fine, only 7 targets. And then last week, guys, 6 targets, was able to score a touchdown, kind of saved you guys there. DK Metcalf does have a 92% target or route share as well as snap share. Last week, he's playing a bunch, obviously. He is Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target. You would expect him to get going a little bit more. You would. And it's worth calling out Calvin Austin, still pretty cheap. He ended up playing 90% of the snaps last week, so his workload from the last 2 weeks has not really changed. End up with 4 targets, only 1 catch though, so not as good of a game as what he had in week 1, but it wouldn't be surprising to see him have a good game. And again, I don't mind the idea of doing a game stack here. I think that's a decent route to go. So if you want to play one or both of those receivers for the Steelers, I'm okay with that. Then it is worth calling out as well, running back wise. We saw the route share be split between Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. Jaylen Warren ended up playing 58% of the snaps total. Gainwell ended up playing a little bit less. I don't think either of them are going to be in play, though, as a result of that. They're just splitting up the workload a little bit too much. So then we go ahead here and get on into the Patriots. I do think Diggs, it is interesting. So through 2 weeks, he hasn't played over 60% of the snaps. Last week, 5 targets, 7 receptions. I kind of thought he would see more work as the season progressed. Maybe he's kind of getting the DeAndre Hopkins situation a little bit, where Hopkins, especially now in his career, is playing more on the money downs, third downs, red zone. I don't think that's what's happening with Diggs. I just think he started off injured and they're working him in slowly. But he still ended up playing 51% of the snaps total and had a 58% route share and ended up with 5 targets last week. Like, that's encouraging, but we do need him to play more. And we've actually seen Matt Collins get a lot of work. Demario Douglas did not play really at all last week. They went with Keyshawn Boutte still being the receiver number 1 for them, having 73% of the routes in that game. Now, he only had 1 catch, 1 touchdown. Good for him. But that's where they're all kind of out of play right now as a result. It will be interesting to see if they continue to hammer Ramondre Stevenson. Okay, 16 opportunities in that game last week, was very successful there as well. I kind of expect that to continue, although it is more of a matchup this week where it should be more split. I'm kind of expecting it. So I don't really think we're playing them. And so for me, it's almost easier to play Rodgers than Drake May. And then we just kind of look at the ownership in this game, guys. Really not much at all as well. So that kind of echoes why it could be a sneaky game stack for you guys there. Patriots, I mean, Drake May is going to get a little bit, 11%. You know, he does project pretty well value-wise, about 3.4x return. Hunter Henry's maybe someone people are thinking about, but overall, not much ownership in this game. And so that's really the point I'm trying to drive home. It could be a low-owned game stack you can get to with some of those players. Now we go ahead and get into a pretty fun game here. We have the Rams versus the Eagles. Okay, so both teams are, playoff caliber teams. Maybe a potential, playoff matchup between these two. Looking at it, there really isn't anything injury-wise that we're too concerned about in this game. We do know, well, that's not true. Dallas Goedert is questionable. Okay, I don't think we're going to play him. Okay, Dallas Goedert being out does help Devonta Smith in general, typically speaking. But we do see last week, guys, did not do much. Okay, he only ended up with 9.3 DFS points. And overall, I don't mind the idea of playing some of the Eagles players, but overall, I don't really see the point of going out of our way to target them. We just kind of know what to expect from that offense. It could be Jalen Hurts scoring a 1-yard rushing touchdown. It could be Barkley scoring a 2-yard rushing touchdown. It does feel like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, though, are both kind of due to have a big game. Maybe that ends up happening. I don't think we need to go crazy with that. And what's surprising to me here as well is that it is only a 44.5 game total. Like, to me, I thought this would have been a higher scoring game. It is a close game. Eagles are favored to win by 3 points, which I do think is correct. Now, I do want to talk about the running back room here. We did see Kyren Williams kind of cede a little bit of work, only played in 69% of the snaps. Now, he still had 19 opportunities, was close to getting a rushing touchdown. Blake Corum actually came in and finished off the drive, which was more situational. It's just kind of how it occurred. I think 8 times out of 10, Kyren Williams is going to get that touchdown. It wasn't like they brought in Corum because Kyren couldn't get in. It was just based off the game flow at that point. For season-long purposes, guys, I've already touched on this a bunch. Blake Corum is the handcuff. He's probably one of the more valuable handcuffs out there because this is typically a good spot. And it is like Kyren Williams, like this, the worry about him at the start of the season was that he had a tough start of the season strength schedule-wise, given the DVP matchups. Maybe that builds into something where Blake Corum actually gets a little bit more work because Corum is not getting the same amount of defensive attention as Kyren when he's on the field. Maybe that's something that happens. One annoying thing was that Tyler Higbee ended up having a pretty good game last week. After I hyped him up in week 1, he finally got involved in week 2. Okay, the issue with him is he only had a 59% route share, which was a little bit annoying. He did play in 75% of the snaps, though. That game last week was a little bit of a blowout. That was a game in which you are just trying not to make mistakes, so I'm kind of okay with kind of writing that off. Not necessarily a great matchup, though, here against the Eagles, but not one you're going out of your way to dismiss. Puka Nacua still saw limited snaps last week, 68% of the snaps, but he had a 91% route share. Ended up with 9 targets, guys, had a very good end-around touchdown as well. Obviously went off. I do like the idea of paying up for Puka Nacua if we can, but I do want to call it, guys. I mentioned this already this year. Jordan Whittington is the handcuff to both Devontae Adams and also Puka Nacua. But what's surprising is he might hold some season-long value as well. And this is more in regards to like best ball drafts. I've already mentioned a bunch that he is a handcuff for those two, but he ended up playing 66% of the snaps and had a 50% route share, which to me is surprising. I actually like that as a whole. He's not someone that I think we need to target, but at the same time, would not be shocking to see him bust a couple of big plays. He shouldn't be 3K. That's my long way of saying he shouldn't be 3K. All right, so now we go ahead and get into the Jets versus the Bucs. One of the more difficult spots, I will say, this week. Because to me, this is a spot where we want to be targeting players. It is an appealing game to me matchup-wise, but I do think the matchups are a little bit skewed as well. So we have seen Bijan Robinson go off against the Bucs. We also saw Nick Chubb get a late touchdown, although he didn't do much in that game. So when we look at the matchup, like opponent rank-wise, it is very much skewed, I think. Like, guys, the Buccaneers have only given up 150 or 105 rushing yards. The issue is they've given up 166 through the air. And so I don't, like, Breece Hall could get going in the passing game. I just don't want to trust that. That's like kind of ugly to me to want to go out of our way to target that. Now, the Jets have given up a decent amount of rushing yards on the ground game, but their yards per carry aren't terrible. I think that's just more due to like game script. So I don't mind Bucky Irvin, but I also don't want to go out of our way to target him. And on top of that, guys, Bucky Irvin, although snap share wise, it wasn't a split, workload wise, it kind of was. We saw Rachaad White get 10 carries in that game. It was a little bit of a hot hand situation at the end of the game where White was used on like 4 to 5, I think it was 5 straight runs where he was pretty efficient there. And that's really it. Maybe that makes White get a little bit more run in this game. I doubt, maybe though, if they're playing with the lead, sure. Let's actually take a peek at the game. So yeah, the game total is 43.5, nothing crazy there. Point spread is in favor of the Bucs winning by 6, which we would agree with. And so maybe White is part of the grinded out type at the end of the game, but nothing crazy there. Receiver wise, let's take a peek. Nothing too crazy. I think Ibuka is going to play. Maybe Chris Godwin ends up playing next week. I don't expect him to play this week. If we get news that both of those two are potentially out, Sterling Shepard would then become the best value on the slate. Okay, Shepard's already playing a bunch, guys. Over 70% of the snaps, 88% route share last week, 4 targets. He would become almost a must play if Ibuka doesn't abstain. I don't expect that, and I do expect Chris Godwin to sit as well. Could be wrong about that. Quarterback-wise, I do think we could think about Baker Mayfield, but I also don't want to go crazy with that. We are getting Tyrod Taylor at 4.8. Overall, I do think that could end up helping the offense function a little bit more, but I don't see it being like an upgrade for the offense. It's not exactly like Daniel Jones to Anthony Richardson, where Daniel Jones, I kind of mentioned a bunch now, I thought would help that offense and that team as a whole, as it has done thus far. I don't necessarily see that there with Taylor. And so for me, when we're looking at the options that we have in this game, there's not many for the Jets. Maybe Mason Taylor, who is playing a bunch, and they are projected to play from behind. Not a terrible matchup, not a great matchup. Maybe he gets a little bit more involved. Again, with Tyrod Taylor, maybe that helps him get some more looks. And at nearly the min price, if that is something you need to do with your lineup, I don't hate the idea of doing that. Like if you love your lineup and don't want to change it and you only have like 2.7 left over or lower, obviously, it's not a terrible route to go. I could theoretically see myself doing that if I love the rest of my build. All right, so now we go ahead and get into somewhat of another appealing game here between the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. I already mentioned earlier this week that I thought Jonathan Taylor was a core play, okay? Jonathan Taylor is one of the few running backs that are being treated as like true traditional workhorse running backs in regards to his workload, playing like 90% of the snaps, basically getting all the RB carries, and just opportunity-wise, over 20 opportunities in both games thus far. And this has been the way that teams have chosen to attack the Tennessee Titans. Okay, overall, 44 rush attempts, which is a little bit lower, but in terms of rush yards given up, 243. They've also given up 2 rushing touchdowns as well. Not that much work in the passing game, but enough to maybe value JT to be able to get to, a few catches like he has gotten thus far this year. And it is worth calling out, like JT not getting that much ownership thus far. Now, this probably will change. I do expect him to be chalk because he is cheap and he is in a matchup that makes sense. They are 4-point favorites. You always like to target running backs that are 4-point favorites. He is projected to get around 22 opportunities again, and points projection wise about 18. And so this is where I'm like, I'd rather get to JT over Robinson. If we can play both, great. And if you're trying to gain leverage on that Jordan Mason situation because you think it could be more of a Carson Wentz game, and it is worth calling out Carson Wentz, can get those goal line QB sneak carries if needed. I actually don't hate that idea where you're paying up for JT Robinson and then skipping out on Mason. Not a terrible way to go about doing it. Now from there, like Warren, I don't mind at his price tag as well. 4.4, I'm fine with that. He's been solid. It is worth calling out Josh Downs, pretty cheap. Michael Pittman Jr., pretty cheap as well. Both players that I wouldn't be surprised to see have a good game, although I do think the play that we want to get to is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully he doesn't get vultured by Daniel Jones as well in this game. And then we go ahead and get into the Titans. Nothing too crazy here, guys. Like Tony Pollard is expected to get a sizable workload. Pollard had an 89% snap share, so he has gained that workhorse workload. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but he's not bad. I mean, 5.7, like we are fine with that price tag. He's more of a shoulder shrug play. Like if you're closing out your lineup and you need a solid play overall at that price tag, you shrug your shoulders, put Tony Pollard in there, know that you're likely to get a pretty high floor, okay? Like he's projected to get 13.5 fantasy points. I would argue his floor is probably like 8, which is, I think, pretty solid. He has been used as much as the passing game as we would like him to be. That's concerning because they have been playing from behind as well. Another interesting thing as well to me has been Tyler Lockett. He's not playing a bunch, only about 50% of the snaps. We actually saw DK get a little bit more work in that game. He's been priced. I'm not saying we need to play him, but worth calling out there. Io Manor has been the play. I think he's a solid value as well. Played 72% of the snaps last week, guys. Ended up with 4 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. We look at what he's projected to get. Not terrible. 2.5x return on value, about 9 points. I think we're okay with him as a solid value. And even Calvin Ridley's pretty cheap. Like he is someone that almost feels like he's due for a big game as well. But he has been kept in check for the most part. Like Ward is not like that bad. And Io Manor is certainly an interesting play. If he's someone that is left on your waiver wire, he should not be. Okay, every team, if you're in a 12-team league, every team should have some roster, a team in the league, should have a spot for him on their roster. He should not be on a waiver wire if he is. So worth calling that out. But he's a good value play for us as well in a game where the Colts are expected to play from behind. He's not going to be that high owned. I think that's solid. All right, so now we go ahead and get into the Raiders versus the Commanders. Another somewhat low-scoring game, about 44.5, 45 points. Point spread, it is in favor of the Commanders, which is interesting because they are going to be playing Marcus Mariota. We are seeing some different sites there. I would actually favor the Raiders in this game. I know Geno Smith looked terrible. And actually, I don't mind Marcus Mariota as a talent. I thought when he was with the Falcons, he did get kind of the shaft there where Desmond Ridder's just a terrible quarterback. That was always strange. I thought he played fine that year. And when we have seen him thus far in the preseasons, since then, he's looked fine. So I guess I kind of get it. But at the same time, I think it should be more of a toss-up. Now, that being said, this is one of our roster decisions that we are making, okay? We're expecting Daniels to sit in this game. Mariota's at 4K. Okay, he is someone that will rush the football, and if he throws for a touchdown, he is simply too cheap at this price tag. So this is where if you are playing Jordan Mason, you're kind of treating him as a core play, and again, not Carson Wentz. I do think we want to be ending up on Mariota instead because he should hold somewhat of a floor. And so that is to me where he is appealing as well. Now, receiver-wise, you could get to Deebo Samuel. I don't mind that. The issue with Deebo Samuel is that a lot of his production last week came at the end of the game, okay? And that is concerning, but he still played a bunch, still had manufactured touches, still had 8 targets in that game. Like, he's still an appealing play. Like, he has been heavily involved, and I don't see that going away here in this matchup between the Raiders. And if anything, you would argue that he's going to get more work as well because Austin Eckler is injured. Maybe gets used in the backfield a little bit more. Maybe gets a little bit more manufactured touches as well. The issue then becomes, though, his ADOT would likely drop, which he's already someone that gets the ball a lot around the line of scrimmage. And if your ADOT is being dropped, sure, that could raise your floor, but it's also going to lower your ceiling. So that is a little bit of concern. And maybe if they are giving a lot of defensive attention to him, Terry McLaurin finally goes off. Remember in week 1, he should have had a touchdown that Jaden Daniels just flat out missing him on. And I do think if that play is hit, we are having a different outlook on Terry because then he's had one really good game and then one okay game. He's another player that I thought would start off slow this season, but I think he's a great buy low opportunity in fantasy football season-long leagues. And I think for game stack purposes, like look how cheap of a stack we can get if we go with Marcus Mariota if he ends up playing and then go with either both or one of Deebo and Terry McLaurin. And that being said, it wouldn't be surprising to see Ertz get more work, although this is a more difficult matchup for him. Now, a lot of people are going to hype up Bill, and if McNichols ends up sitting, which I'm not expecting, but he is questionable, then he'd be an interesting play. But I do expect Chris Rodriguez to get some work in this game now as a result of Eckler being out. And if you look at it, McNichols, and it was mostly due to game script, but he was the player that actually saw an increase in his snaps last week. And so in passing down plays, it does seem like it will be McNichols. This is not a good matchup. And so I'm just taking the wait and see approach there with those running backs mostly. Now we go ahead now and jump into the Raiders. As you guys know, I've kind of hyped up Jacoby Myers a decent amount, especially lately. What he did last week, not a surprise. Again, since Devontae Adams has requested a trade from the Raiders and then he obviously got traded, Jacoby Myers has been Devontae Adams. Like, whether people see it or not, I'm going to keep reiterating this point. He has been extremely productive. He has been a receiver number 1 or high-end receiver number 2 in season-long leagues because he's getting a lot of targets. And Geno Smith is a quarterback upgrade. And so the fact that he's gotten 12 and 10 targets, not shocking at all. That is something that should continue again. And he should be a 6K player. I do not get it. This is a very cheap price tag. I think he is someone we should be considering still this week. Until he's above 6K, he's someone you should still play. And it is worth calling out. Let's take a peek at his ownership. 7% or so if we round up. Probably should be 10%. Probably should be 10%. Some people are getting to Genty as well. I don't hate that. Like, you would expect him to get more of a workload. But from there, I think the rest of the plays are pretty much plays that we do not need to go out of our way to target. To me, it's just Myers. Like, Trey Tucker's playing a lot of snaps, but we don't need to go out of our way to target him. Maybe Brock Bowers, one more week healthy, we could look at him, but no. He's a little bit too priced up for me. And so now we get into another fun game as well. We got the Broncos versus the Chargers. Okay, now the issue that we're going to have in this game is that the matchups are not good for basically all the positions. That is a concern. Now, we do got to consider maybe some tight end value that we will get. Like Will Dissly, if he ends up sitting, that should mean that Tyler Conklin is going to get a bunch of work in this game. Tyler Conklin ended up playing 49% of the snaps last week, and I would imagine that, I don't think it would be 100% snap share, but I think it 70%. And at this price tag, that becomes very appealing. Now, the issue is that Ladd McConkey's already getting a lot of work. Keenan Allen's already getting a lot of targets. And then Quentin Johnson is playing well as well. That could be a concern there. But overall, definitely worth calling out that if Dissly is out, he is someone we should be looking at. Now, I will say, I think the pricing for the Chargers players in this matchup with the Broncos are all a little bit too priced up. I have Justin Herbert in my season-long leagues. I'm a little bit worried about the matchup. Now, when we look at the games thus far for the Broncos, yes, the Colts, it is still Daniel Jones. I know I've been hyping him up, but it is still Daniel Jones. And then you get week 1 against the Titans. Yes, Cam Ward, first NFL start. They should have played well, right? Now, that being said, I would argue that the teams that the Broncos have played were all a little bit more difficult as well. So I don't mind the idea of getting to some of the Bronco players a little bit more. And then just worth calling out, guys, probably a little bit too much season-long talk in this video, but if you are someone that can, I would try to acquire RJ Harvey. Okay. Right now, this backfield is a definite split. Okay. J.K. Dobbins played 46% of snaps, RJ Harvey 31, and Tyler Batty 22. The intention, I do think, is for our Harvey to be the RB1, maybe not the workhorse running back for them, but RB1 by the end of the season to the point where he's playing 50% of the snaps and getting a majority of the touches. DFS-wise, we don't care about that. DFS wise, we're not playing any of the running backs. Receiver wise, it is a little bit interesting. Troy Franklin ended up being kind of the receiver number one in this game. It played 85% of the snaps, 90% route share, had a good game, 9 targets, 6 targets. So when the Denver Broncos traded Devon Valet, I thought it was interesting, but I also thought that was definitely just they were confident in Troy Franklin. Also, Pat Bryant. Pat Bryant's not playing all that much, but Troy Franklin looked good in the preseason and now has played 2 good games as well. So if this ends up being a situation where it's either going to be like him or Sutton type of game, that is fascinating because obviously Sutton's going to get a lot of the defensive attention. And if Troy Franklin ends up having a good game, that could ultimately be a good thing for Sutton. But as a result, right now, I think we could only potentially look at Troy Franklin, who is still at a cheap price tag. Like, even if he got 6 targets again, this would end up being a cheap price tag for him while he's playing that many snaps. Like, to me, that is appealing. All right, so now let's go ahead and get into the Saints versus the Seahawks, okay? Running back-wise, I will say Alvin Kamara is someone that I will probably have as a high exposure play. So not exactly a core play, not exactly a lock-to-hit value. I do think he has a pretty high floor. He is being a workhorse running back. Workload-wise, is being a workhorse running back. Now, the issue and the concern with him is that this game is a 7.5 point spread in favor of the Seahawks. Maybe it becomes a little bit more than that. Maybe it ends up being a little bit more of a blowout. And it is a low-scoring game total as well. That is where, for Alvin Kamara and really the rest of the Saints, their ceiling is a little bit capped, which for GPP purposes is a little bit concerning. We don't necessarily love that there. But it is tough to deny a player that had 85% of the snaps last week while getting 27 opportunities. Now, in week 1, they basically went away from him. I do think that was a correction there in week 2 where they realized their mistake and they just kept giving him carries. Now, this is a very solid matchup against the Seahawks. The Seahawks have given up the 4th most points on average per game at 28.6 to opposing running backs. And that has mostly been due, I shouldn't say mostly, it has been due to them giving up over 50 more receiving yards to opposing running backs and giving up 19 receptions, which is also the most as well. They haven't given up a touchdown to opposing running back, but that being said, Alvin Kamara's already gained like a 80% route share at the running back position. He should have a high floor just because of how involved he will be in the passing game, given this matchup with the Seahawks. And so again, looking at Jordan Mason compared to Alvin Kamara, is there actually a big difference other than the price tag where Jordan Mason's a little bit lower priced? This could end up being a good buying opportunity. Actually, let's take a peek at the ownerships. Yeah, I mean, I expect this to get corrected a little bit more. The opening ownerships are always much lower in general than I expect, and then as the week progresses, they get updated. But if he is under 10% and Jordan Mason's going to be like 20% and the pricing difference isn't that much, that ends up being crazy to me. That ends up being a great lever spot on the slate, guys. Like, he could go off. That is how you beat the Seahawks, is throwing the football to your running back, and that is what Alvin Kamara does. Now, from there, we know what you guys already know the play I'm going to tell you guys. Juwan Johnson. He's someone I called out in week 1 as a decent play, especially as price tag. And then week 2, I mentioned he was a core play. He's the only tight end I was going on my way to target. In terms of first read options, he ranks out 2nd in the league for tight ends. Trey McBride being number 1. He's playing like 90% of the snaps. Even based off of this, guys, 4 receptions, 42 receiving yards to be projected to get 9.8 points. 2.5x value. Like, that is a solid play. He should have a high floor for how much he's going to play. And on top of that, he does get a good matchup going against the Seahawks defense that, hasn't given up that many yards in general. They have given up a decent amount of receptions, but they've given up 2 touchdowns, which is that's the reason why it's one of the easier matchups is the 2 touchdowns. So it's not as good of a matchup as it seems on paper, I will say, but it's not a bad matchup by any means. Like, this is still a plus matchup for opposing tight ends. And so Juwan Johnson is still one of my favorite plays on the slate. Now, I will say the receivers I'm probably staying away from. They are all cheap, though. That is worth calling out, worth considering. I do think Devon Valet could end up getting a little bit more work in this game as well. But that's not something I want to go out of my way to target. Like, Valet played 36% of the snaps. Cooks 67%, Shaheed 69%, and then Chris Olave, guys, ended up playing 100% of the snaps. Like, the targets have been great for him. Pretty high floor as well. That's highly appealing, don't get me wrong, and they are expected to be playing from behind. Like, I don't mind that. I just think he's going to be more of an afterthought, and I do think his ceiling is capped. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but not terrible there as well. And then I do want to go ahead and get into the Seahawks, guys. Cooper Kupp, prop-wise, was one of the better prop bets to go over like his fantasy score. Ended up doing pretty well last week. Obviously had a good game. Really, week 1, he had a bad drop in that game, and the offense just did not look good. Last week, he ended up with 9 targets, 9 receiving yards. This is more of what we expected, is for him to get a heavy target share and also JSN to get a heavy target share. Those were the 2 players that we would have thought at the start of the season would begin the work that they were getting. Now, what we didn't really expect at the start of the year was for Zach Charbonnet to get the majority of the work. That has happened through 2 games thus far. Now, maybe you would have thought at the start of the season that could occur because Kenneth Walker was seemingly a little bit more banged up, and they want to keep Kenneth Walker fresh. That has not really changed the workload for Kenneth Walker. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season that he would be getting around 14 opportunities per game, I'd have been like, all right, sign me up for that. He has the talent. Obviously, we would want more, closer to like 17, but I've been fine with that. And so if Zach Charbonnet ends up sitting in this game, Kenneth Walker does probably become one of the better plays, although don't be surprised if we see George Holani get some work as well. I would say it's probably going to be more of a 65, maybe 20 split with Holani, and then maybe another backup gets some work as well. But Kenneth Walker ends up being a pretty decent GPP play if Charbonnet ends up sitting. Now, to me, neither of the quarterbacks are really in play, although they are cheap. Like Sam Darnold, 5.1, definitely a little bit too cheap. And now we go ahead and get into my favorite game of the week. That's going to be the Dallas Cowboys versus the Chicago Bears, mostly because this should be more of a shootout. And that is what the data is telling us as well, guys. Looking at it, 50.5 points, which I will say the Bears offense is going to need to look a little bit better if that's going to be the case. Guys, if you are betting on this game as well, I find it crazy that the Dallas Cowboys are only a 0.5 point favorites on some of the books. Like, that should not be happening. I would bet on them to win. Like, I think that's pretty good. The Bears have just not looked good. The Dallas Cowboys were a CeeDee Lamb catch away from probably being 2-0. Okay, to me, I am treating like Dak Prescott as my core play quarterback this week. But again, with Wentz and Mariota at the min price, it just makes more sense to play those two. But for GPP purposes, I love the idea of getting to Dak and then some of the other options. Dak should be throwing the football a bunch. Again, if CeeDee Lamb catches a couple more passes in that first game, Dak ends up having 2 pretty darn good games, most likely. Running back wise, Javonte Williams is certainly in play as well. He is getting kind of a workhorse workload right now as well. Okay, Javonte Williams ended up playing 71% of the snaps last week, and that is appealing to me when a guy is getting this much work. Okay, 17 opportunities in week 1, and then last week, guys, in a good matchup, and this is a good matchup as well, over 20 opportunities in this game, which is insane. Okay, so this week, I think, given the matchup with the Bears, he is someone we should be treating as a core play as well. And so this is where the week definitely becomes interesting. So we have like 5 really good running back plays: Robinson, Taylor, Mason, Kamara, and then we also have Javonte Williams. I might set a rule where I get 3 of those players in all my builds, especially like 20 entry max contests where I'm trying to raise the floor. GPP wise, probably sticking to running back and receiver. And personally, I would rather get to CeeDee Lamb, who 11 targets, 13 targets, over 100 receiving yards in both games, has not scored a touchdown as well. Given the matchup with the Bears, who have just looked terrible thus far, I think that's highly appealing. He is one of the players I'm trying to actively pay up for. That being said, I do think George Pickens is someone we're looking at value-wise. Finally had a good game last week. Started off kind of slow there. I don't mind him in GPPs. If you guys watch my core plays video, maybe it's my first video, you saw I had a stack with a lot of the Dallas players, but then we were running it back with the Chicago Bears players. So I do think there is a chance that this could end up being a DJ Moore game, simply because the first 2 games have been Rome Odunze games. Okay, Odunze is not leaving the field, and at his price tag, I am still treating him as a core play. Okay, that is the way to go for sure. But do not be surprised if it ends up being more of a DJ Moore game, simply because the defense might be keying in a little bit more on Rome Odunze now that he has been the receiver number 1 for 2 games. And if you watch the games, like, you are noticing Caleb Williams miss DJ Moore a bunch as well. So Caleb Williams is the biggest difference maker in this game, because that first half, he did look good against the Vikings, and then since then has been pretty bad. Now, he is rushing the football a decent bunch, which does raise his floor. He is someone that, for GPPs, we certainly are looking at and should be looking at. I do want to call the running back situation as well. DeAndre Swift is currently questionable. We are expecting him to play, but he could be someone that ends up being limited. And it is worth calling out, guys. Kyle Monangai, even though the game was a blowout, I understand, he played 42% of the snaps and actually looked pretty decent in the tail end of that game. He is someone that in college was a high volume guy. It wouldn't be surprising to see this be more of a 50-50 split, and maybe he gets like a touchdown in this game. It is tough to find a more appealing value running back play than Kyle Monangai at almost the min price. A running back that could theoretically play 50% of the snaps, that has strangely been used in the passing game. I say that because he is terrible at pass blocking. Like, Ben Johnson, you're supposed to be this offensive mastermind. Me, a guy that's biased towards Kyle Monangai, a guy that's been hyping him up probably just as much or more than anyone else in the fantasy football space, is telling you he sucks in the passing game. Like, what are you doing? I know that DeAndre Swift isn't all that better, but go out and get someone that can make a block for Caleb Williams. Jeez, it's crazy. I get surprised. It should be flipped, I think, more. It should be more Monangai as more of the RB1. Then you bring in Swift for the second and third downs. Like it's kind of weird. But anyways, 4.1, definitely a cheap price tag, especially if Swift is obviously out. But if he's limited, that's very appealing there as well. So let's just go ahead here and take a peek at the ownership. Yes, they are all going to be chalk. The Dallas Cowboy players are going to be chalk. This is probably going to be higher owned. Okay, this is going to be a popular stack. Just an interesting pivot just right away off of like CeeDee Lamb would be George Pickens. Maybe it isn't a CeeDee Lamb game. And if it's not, the Bears defense is not good. It will be a George Pickens game. Now, Jake Ferguson is cheap as well. I should call out. It wouldn't be surprising to see him have a good game as well. And if Turpin's out, maybe Jalen Tolbert becomes a play that we can look at as well. But that is instantly a good way to gain leverage on the field is by still eating the chalk with Dak and then just going with Pickens instead of Lamb. Again, I'm not saying do that, but it's not a bad way to get a little bit different. Caleb Williams probably should be higher owned just because he is getting a decent rushing floor with that. Okay, 5 rush attempts, last 2 games. Love that there from him. Look at Roma Dunze, guys. Very interesting play. And then DJ Moore, basically the same price tag as well. They are both certainly in play. Okay, this is a game that I do think we should be game stacking. It is appealing. And they're all cheap. It's a cheap game stack where you still can pay up for other studs elsewhere if you choose to do so. And to me, it seems pretty clear the players that we should be on in this game as well. That makes it easier. And then now we're going to get into the last game on this slate here as well. We got the Cardinals versus the Niners. Okay, so let's start out with the Niners. They're more interesting. So Brock Purdy, currently questionable. I do think we're going to expect him to, I've been expecting him to sit. I think it's still going to be Mac Jones. But if he ends up playing, I do think that elevates Ricky Pearsall. I do think that elevates Jawan Jennings as plays a decent amount. And that also helps out CMC a decent amount here as well. Okay, because you're getting a quarterback upgrade. And I know Mac Jones played pretty well last week. But overall, we shouldn't be trusting on that. And so to me, that is a plus for all the players if Brock Purdy ends up playing. And I don't think, based off of how Mac Jones played last week, that they would risk playing Brock Purdy, especially being 2-0, if he's not ready to go. Like you could somewhat sacrifice a loss to get your franchise quarterback healthy for one more game. So I do like CMC a lot, but he's like the 6th running back on my list in terms of priority plays. Okay, Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings both played the same amount of snaps, basically. Pearsall ended up with 6 targets in that game, not as involved, but still had a very good game. You saw Jawan Jennings get 10 targets in that game, simply, I think, because Mac Jones just throws it deep a little bit more. And so in a weird way, Brock Purdy is a better quarterback for Ricky Pearsall slightly, and Mac Jones is a better quarterback for Jawan Jennings. I do prioritize Pearsall over Jennings. He's a slightly better option, a slightly better player as a whole, but I think defenses know that as well. It is more of a 1A, 1B situation here, though. And so that's why they're priced that way. They're both certainly in play at their prices, but again, more shoulder shrug plays to me. Then we go ahead and get into the Cardinals. Nothing too crazy here, but I do want to talk about the running back split. So I was personally shocked that it was more of a running back split actually in this game. I didn't think James Conner looked bad, but it was 52% James Conner, 46% Trey Benson. And Trey Benson was much more involved in the passing game. So Trey Benson had a 54% route share in that game. Again, a little bit shocking to me. To me, that just leads us to not want to play either of them. It is worth calling out, though. If Benson is going to get that much work and he ended up with 6 targets in the receiving game, a little bit appealing, but nothing too crazy there. And then from there, receiver-wise, yeah, pretty ugly for the receivers, guys. Marvin Harrison Jr. Seriously, serious question here. Quentin Johnston or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Serious question. Both first-round picks. Marvin Harrison Jr. now through 2 years has not been better than Johnston in the 2 years. And just name value, I think most people would just say Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know. Interesting thought there. I don't think we can really play any of the Cardinals in general because it's a little bit streaky. I don't really trust the production. The only production I trust is to Trey McBride, and Trey McBride is basically priced that way. If you can afford to pay for him, sure, get that high floor. I would rather go with Johnson at this point, given the fact that he's significantly cheaper. And so real quickly, guys, let's just try to finish a lineup out here for you guys. So I mentioned I really like Renfro as a value play. For this specific lineup, we wouldn't need to get to him. Let's just change him out, although I do really think he's a good value play. DST-wise, worth calling out as well. Like the Commanders are a little bit interesting there. Broncos, I don't think we're playing them. Let's see here. The DST that I like the most is definitely the Raiders. Okay, we've seen they got 5 and 10 fantasy points. They haven't really given up that many points in a game as well. And you are looking at Marcus Mariota playing quarterback in that game. So to me, it is appealing to get to the Raiders. And then we have 7.6 left over here, guys. I'm fine getting to Jefferson. Again, I don't think Carson Wentz is that big of a downgrade. But if we're doing that, then we would probably have to come off of Jordan Mason. And so that is the difficult part about the slate. So let's see what it actually looks like if we get to Dak instead, play Dak there. Then we have 5.7 left over. We had these plethora of plays that we can get to at the receiver spot that I mentioned I like. Jacoby Myers, Ricky Pearsall, Johnson, I don't mind. Yeah, DJ Moore there. Now we want to play DJ Moore with the lineup with Rome Odunze. I actually don't mind that. I think this is a good game to stack. I think it's a good stacking opportunity. So sure, we could do that. Let's just do that for this sample. Like, I do think it has a chance to be a shootout. So not a bad lineup there. And so guys, just giving you guys a sample of kind of what the lineups are being presented to us for the week. Interesting that it's getting Breece Hall as one of the better lineups in there. I don't necessarily see that. I kind of get what the data might be saying, but again, I think it is a very concentrated running back pool that we are looking at. Jordan Mason is pulled up in here. CMC, what we're seeing in there as well. Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and then obviously Javonte Williams as well. Javonte Williams is not being pulled in here, which I do find a little bit interesting. It is tending to try to pay up at the tight end position, although you guys know I like Juwan Johnson. Just kind of interesting. So it does like Bijan Robinson, then CMC, does like JSN a decent amount, but it is still getting to a relative amount of the players that I wanted to be on. So interesting there in general. But I do always like to call that out to you guys. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. It was a longer video, I know, but I do like to break it down kind of step by step and give you guys my full thought process for the weeks. And hopefully that sparks some ideas for you guys. If you like that and if you appreciate it, make sure to let me know in the comment section below. That is always appreciated. If you guys would like any access to any of the tools that you saw in this video, the cheat sheet, the lineup builder, or some of the prop tools as well, head on over to 9to5sports.com. Get access to all the tools for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.